Joe Navara is a business and executive coach, speaker, and author of 4 Amazon best-selling books. Joe strongly believes in the power of business relationships and having a strong mindset. Having been a sales professional for over 3 decades, selling both printing and real estate very successfully, Joe attributes most of the credit for his success to business relationships he developed, many of which he still has after more than 30 years. He also has a hunger for never-ending personal and professional development. Joe's desire to educate business leaders, business owners, and sales professionals on leadership, sales, marketing, and business mindset keeps Joe busy through speaking and coaching. The relationships he's developed through sales and networking have always been a great source of referrals in new business. Joe currently lives in Burlington, North Carolina, with his wife, Julie, and their cat, Lady Oliver. Ladies and gentlemen, Joe Navara. What made you decide to go into consulting and start Growth Academy?
So it started it's coming up on 12 years. We're going to say July 1st. July 3rd will be 12 years. I had been in the printing industry for many years, probably over 25 years. I had sold real estate as well in Brooklyn for many years. But I was, at this point, about 12 years ago, I was closing my printing business. And I had been going through that whole, what do I want to be when I grow up? Because I was just done. I was ready to leave the printing industry after so many years. And I had been sitting in the audience of another speaker, of a professional speaker, and on sales. And while I was watching him, it was like I was watching my head, it started going in my head like, he's not doing anything that I can't do. He's not saying anything that I haven't said 1,000 times to other people. And I feel like I could deliver it at least as well as he's delivering right now. And with some practice, maybe better. And so there was literally like that light switch got turned on inside of my heart. I went home. I looked up what it would take to be a speaker and what do I need to do. And I had a personal friend, have still, who is a professional speaker. She speaks all over the world. And I reached out to her and said I wanted to grab coffee with her and tell her about what I'm seeing for my future. We met for coffee and she told me, Joe, I could see you doing, I told her what I was thinking. What topic I wanted to specialize in, at least at the beginning. Mm-hmm. And she said, the first thing I had to do was, she said, you've got to write a book. She said, the book will add credibility to back you up. Okay, no problem. So I went home that night and I started writing my first book. And I closed the doors of my printing business on July 1st of 2013. And on July 3rd, 2 days later, I did my first speaking engagement.
Wow.
Now, it was a free speaking engagement. When you're starting out, you have to do free. A friend of mine, his name is Kevin Snyder, who's an amazing speaker. He always says the first is free, the second gets the fee. And I love that, and I try to live by that. So I was giving them the freebie. And so at that time, I was primarily speaking on networking, business networking, and referrals, developing referral relationships. And there's a big market for that, and there's a great need for that because, as we both know, a lot of people network very poorly. Mm-hmm. So I did that for a couple of months, and then what was happening was that folks were starting to come to me after my speaking engagements and asking me if I could coach them to do a deeper dive into what I was speaking about. Mm-hmm. And so I hired somebody who helped me to then go and develop at that time it was just a 4-week coaching program. Mm-hmm. That was only about networking and developing referral relationships, referral partnerships. And we called it the Referral Marketing Success Course. And so and now I offer that strictly as an online, mm-hmm. self-study course. It's still available, and I, did all the recordings. But that was how the coaching started. So we'd say about 2 to 3 months into speaking is where the coaching started.
That was fast.
Yeah, it was very fast. Then so this is the funny part. So I'm speaking. I was only seeing myself as a speaker who coached also. But the coaching was bringing in some money. Right. And I was seeing that I was helping people. There were a lot of people who were really benefiting. Some would go through the 4-week program and then like a year later would come back and want to do it again. So that to me was a testament, because they had up-leveled and they wanted to, now network at this higher level. This one woman that I had coached, she went through the program, and we were in a business group together. And so one day she said to me, she referred to her coach. She was working with her coach on this, this, and this. And I said to myself, I just said to her, I said, your coach? What do you mean your coach? And she said, well, after the referral marketing program, you didn't have anything else to offer. And that was like a light bulb went off. And that's when I said, okay, we need to create something else to offer. Because at this point, I was starting to speak on prospecting. I was speaking a lot on mindset. I was speaking a lot on just, customer service. It wasn't just the networking anymore. Right. Leadership, areas like that. So I hired somebody else, actually 2 different people I hired. One helped me create the outline, and then the other one helped me to really put the meat and potatoes into the program. And so so that initially it was a really terrible name. It was called Goal Execution Coaching. Okay, terrible name. but people knew it as Joe Navara Coaching. That was, I was the coach. I was doing everything. I was the speaker. I was the coach. I was the marketer. I did everything.
All the hats.
Yep, I wore every hat. But then when I realized that as we'll call it, my client base, it was just getting too difficult for me to keep and maintain all of them. But I wanted to still be able to give the same level of service to people. I wanted to hire another coach to work with me. And I knew that doing that would mean that I could, I'm not Tony Robbins, I'm not Darren Hardy, Jim Rohn, or Brene Brown. I'm not a name brand out there. So that's when I realized I needed a business name. And we talked about it, my wife and I talked about it for quite a while. And that's when we came up with Growth Academy. And it's Growth Academy Coaching and Training. And that was I know that was a long answer, how we got to Growth Academy Coaching and Training. But I feel very good about that, because it really does I am so much about growth. I love that Tony Robbins saying, if you're not growing, you're dying. And I really believe strongly in that. So I'm constantly working on myself. And those are the kinds of people that I work with as well.
Right. Those that have the mindset that want to grow.
Yes. Growth mindset.
You
versus
can't teach somebody
mindset.
who's not being teachable.
Nope.
So if somebody were to walk into Growth Academy for the first time, what core principles would they see in action?
So if they were to start working with us, or even if they were just feeling us out to see if we're the kind of coaching company that they'd want to work with, what they would see is there's a few things that are very apparent with us. Number one is we are very much about integrity. What you see is what you get. Authenticity. We believe in being super transparent, not to the point where it's TMI, but we're very much about authenticity and transparency. That's number one. Number two is accountability. So I'm very strong, believe very strongly that we have to hold our clients accountable. And that is one of the things that we repeatedly hear, feedback we hear is that they love the accountability. You can always tell somebody, we rarely have clients who don't stay with us. We'll say, longer than 6 months. Okay, rarely do we have that. The ones that usually don't are the ones that don't want to be held accountable. And when they find that they are not doing the work that they're committing to themselves to do, and our other coaches, folks on our team, are holding them accountable for that, you see that pushback from them. And and so they are the ones that sometimes they don't even make it past 3 months.
Wow.
And that's okay. I don't believe in judging them. I don't believe in shaming them in any regard. We are just not the right fit.
All right.
So that's what they're going to find when they come in. The other thing from my experience, this is speaking my experience here, is another differentiator that I experience with coaches that I've worked with as my coach in the past, most coaches, is I believe in being very direct. Okay, I don't believe in dancing around any subjects. And if I think that if I offend you because I'm being direct, that's on you. Because I'll give you an example. I'll try and change it as much as I can,
Right.
but try to be very clear. Somebody was having major issues in their personal life that kept carrying over into their business, and it just kept, and they kept blaming this other person in their personal life about the problems that they were having in the business. And so one day I just straight out called this person out on that relationship. But actually then I took it a step further and was talking about past relationships that mirrored this relationship. Was that the issue? And we had one more coaching session after that, and never heard from this person again, because that was the problem. The person that she was having the issue with, a couple of years later, reached out to me and thanked me for having called this person out.
Wow.
Because that was a really breaking point, not a breaking point, it was a monumental moment for them. But I pissed this person off enough. But you know what? To me, it had to be done. And I don't want to hurt somebody's feelings. I don't want to. Some people, they just need to be called out on their BS.
Yeah.
And
That is
stop
true.
blaming other
It
people.
hurts.
Yeah.
What is it? The truth will piss you off, and then it'll make things clear.
Exactly. And that's
something
what
like that.
happened there. So, yeah, and so that's a big difference. And again, without trying to hurt people intentionally, but I want to be very direct.
Do you find that more difficult being in the South than you would if you were further up north? Because I know you're originally from up north. Do you think there's a difference in the receiving of that down here?
This person was actually from the north,
Oh, okay.
who happened to live down here, just to make that clear. I think that, honestly, I think that people in the South, while they might say that they'll make fun of folks from the North about being so direct, and I actually think that they appreciate it more than they let on that they do. My wife is a wonderful example of that. My wife had, she's born and raised in the South, and she said that one of the things that drove her crazy was that the men were not direct about their intentions. And where she said that when I asked her on a date, I asked her out, and I said to her, I want this to be clear that I'm asking you on a date, not just two friends going to hang out. and she said that no man had ever been that direct with her.
Interesting.
And here we are, we're married.
Yep, there you go. It worked out.
Yeah, it worked out. It worked out very well. But yeah, so I actually love the folks and people in the South. I really do. Yeah.
So let's switch gears a little bit.
Okay.
One of the most important things that you teach on is growth mindset.
Yes.
Can you, for people who've never heard of having a growth mindset and don't know what that is, can you give us a rundown of what is a growth mindset and why is it so important as a business person to have a growth mindset?
Yeah, so first there's a wonderful book called Mindset by, is it Carol Dwecker?
I think so.
Yeah, and she talks about in the book the difference between the fixed mindset and the growth mindset. And the fixed mindset is, what really stops people from moving forward in their lives. And I don't want to go down that rabbit hole, but if you find you're, talking about it too much, but if you find that you're often, you're very stuck and closed-minded and, this is just the way I do it, then you probably have a fixed mindset, okay? We probably all have folks in our family like that. Maybe some of our best friends can be that way. The growth mindset, that's something that you can develop that. Some people will have you believe or want to believe it themselves that, that not everybody can have a growth mindset. You're either born with it or not. And that is not the truth. It's just like emotional intelligence, where you can develop your emotional intelligence to be stronger or weaker over time. The growth mindset is very much the same way. The more you practice it, the more you practice making changes, the more you practice challenging yourself, the more you practice learning other things and growing, the more you're going to develop that growth mindset. But here's the best part of it, is that then you're, without even realizing it subconsciously, your mind will always be looking for it, looking for opportunities for growth. So that's like now, I could just be listening to the radio and there's something will come on that will all of a sudden trigger an idea in my mind. That like, oh my God, I could take this and I can develop that into that. And next thing I know, like I'm daydreaming for a half an hour. I've already missed my exit, 20 minutes ago.
Right.
But it's that whole, it's that our mind, when you have a growth mindset, that's what starts to happen is you start to dream and always looking for better ways to grow yourself, grow your own life, grow the life, help the people around you. It's just such a different way of living.
Yeah. So on that note, when you have a growth mindset and you are constantly finding new ideas and new pathways to go down, how do you stop yourself from squirreling and jumping around back and forth? What grounds you in that moment?
That's an awesome question. So everything I do, first I have to look at it, is this going to help me in my mission? Okay, is this what I'm looking to do? Will that help me in my mission? Is this a part of my goals? Or is it a distraction? So here's an example is I have 2 fiction novels written. I wrote them many years ago and they've been sitting, they're on my computer and the printed out versions are in my nightstand. And I, have aspirations of one day rewriting them and getting them published. And especially now that it's so easy to self-publish. So I was, about 4 or 5 years ago, one of my mentors, I was speaking to him and I was telling him that what my intentions were. This was during the pandemic. My business was actually really taking off at that time. And I had mentioned it to him that I was thinking of dusting them off and rewriting them and getting them published. And he's like, Joe, that sounds like a great idea. I think that's really going to help the bottom line of your business. and I was like, okay,
Ooh.
sarcasm gotten, I get it, thank you. Well, So that was, so I have to be careful of that. Okay, one of those, I was thinking that the books would kind of add to, be something else I could sell at my events and things like that. But he was right. It would just been a distraction. So I wrote 2 more business books instead that were more focused, that would help me in the business.
Gotcha. So the bottom line there is you have to be clear on your mission and your goals and what you want to accomplish before you can even start to sort out which rabbit holes you are worth chasing down.
And just have an idea book. Have an idea book that you write your ideas down so that you can go back and look at them every once in a while and say, hey, could this fit now? And okay, what about this? And so those are things that you can do so that you don't have to, every time you have an idea, dig a grave for it and put it in, and bury it. It's actually something that you could plant that seed for the future.
Gotcha. So if somebody, going back to growth mindset, if somebody feels like they are stuck in survival mode within their business, how do they get out of survival mode to start thinking towards a growth mindset?
Yeah, well, I've been in survival mode. During the recession, I owned, a printing company, and I was 100% in survival mode. One of the first things I do want to say, when you're in survival mode, you can still have the growth mindset. Okay. One of my favorite stories is from Les Brown. Do you know who Les Brown is? Yeah. One of my favorite stories is he was talking about that his house was going to be foreclosed on. And he knew that he just needed I don't know, I'm going to make up a number. He needed $1,000 to keep his house from being foreclosed on. And he picked up the phone and he just made phone calls, cold calls, until he got a speaking engagement. And then he went and picked up the check. And then delivered that check to the bank, whatever it was he had to do. So he was in survival mode, but still in the growth mindset at the same time. He knew that you have to put in the action. You have to take action. And it has to be action that means something, okay? You don't want to just take action for the sake of taking action. You have to take like he could have just sat there and said, okay, I'm going to take action, I'm going to write a script. I'm going to write a new script. That is not going to pay the mortgage tomorrow that has to be paid. You have to take action that could help be part of the solution. So so you still can have that growth mindset. I knew I was shutting the doors to my printing company. There was no doubt about it. Okay, just things didn't go the way I wanted them to go. I was in survival mode, but at the same time, I was still dreaming about what does my future look like.
Right.
Okay, now I could have closed the company and went to work for somebody else, as like this is going to be what I'm going to do. Right. Instead, what I did was I helped to transition my client list to another company, and I stayed and helped them with the transition while building my business. Okay, so that was how I did that. We made that work. But I had that vision initially within that last year that this is where I'm going to go, and this is how I'm going to do it. So you can be in survival mode and still have the growth mindset, but you have to be taking actions. Actions equal results, and every result will bring you closer to the goal that you're trying to get to.
Gotcha. So as a perfectionist myself, one of the things that I struggle with the most with a growth mindset is I had a plan. This was the plan.
Right.
My plan went sideways.
Right.
Trying to accept my plan is not always going to go the way it's supposed to. I have to be able to pivot.
Right.
And I know that that's a struggle for a lot of people. My daughter and I just had a conversation about it yesterday. She has plans that she wants to accomplish, and she's also a perfectionist because of me, and everything's not going according to her plan, and I had to have that conversation of, you got to learn to pivot. Is there any advice you can give to anyone who's struggling to learn to pivot, to have that growth mindset, or just to pivot in general?
So, I mean, the truth is that that's just going to be, that's life in general, that there are always going to be pivots. And if anything, being a perfectionist can actually fall a little bit more into the fixed mindset. Okay, having the growth mindset, that's something, again, you have to develop. Okay, you have to be willing to feel uncomfortable and experience that discomfort if you want it bad enough. You've got to want it bad enough. I feel to some degree perfection comes from, and this is just me making this up. Perfection comes from a fear base, from the fear that what if, okay, even if it's perfect, if it still doesn't work out. Right. So I'm going to try and make this perfect, because most things, if you're aiming for perfection, they're generally not going to happen. So if I keep working for perfection, it's unlikely I'm ever going to get there, and then that means that I will never be proven wrong. So that doesn't answer, how do you deal with it? The answer is that you have to learn to be okay with feeling uncomfortable. And it doesn't mean that you have to be so uncomfortable that you're vomiting.
Right.
But, so one of my things that I learned for myself, and it's so funny because my wife and I were just talking about it last night, which is very interesting. By nature, I'm very, very shy, okay? And people don't believe it, but I'm very shy, and I'm pretty introverted as well. But more shy than introverted. So many years ago, I said I wanted to start challenging myself to do something scary every single day. And so what I started doing is I started talking to people out in public. Just randomly talk, not like like a crazy person.
Right.
Although I do love talking to a good crazy person every once in a while. But all joking aside, I started talking to people. Just if I noticed something cool, if they had a cool shirt, or if anything, it could be anything. It does not matter. And I started doing that on a regular basis, and it still scares me, but I still do it all the time, and it blows my wife away because she's very shy, very introverted, very sweet, but she's still very, and so she's like, she watches me get in these conversations with people that, like this woman last week, we were at a marriage retreat together, and this woman was sitting in the front row, and she was wearing a Black Sabbath t-shirt. And so I just happened to walk past her, and I said, are you gonna go see the last Black Sabbath show ever? And she was like, looked at me, she was like, no, I don't know anything about it. And so I just started talking to her, about that they're gonna be doing the final Ozzy Osbourne, concert ever. And it turned into this like 10-minute conversation. My wife was sitting over like 20, 30 feet away, and she's like watching me talking to this person, because there was a lot of people there.
Yeah.
And she's kind of like, who is he talking to now?
Wow.
But it's just, it's just about finding, and that's a simple thing. But seriously, finding ways to just challenge yourself, because then there are other things that will be that will be less scary, less challenging, less fearful than before, that you suddenly find yourself doing that you never would have thought you would have done. But it's because you're already challenging yourself in other ways. It's like, yeah, that wasn't so bad.
Yeah, you're building your confidence as you go. That's a lot about Toastmasters. Most people who go to Toastmasters for the first time, leadership and speaking, they've never stood in front of anybody to speak. And once they've done it a couple of times, it just builds their confidence and it makes them more comfortable to the point that next thing you know, they're going to be on a stage in front of 5,000 people.
I did it for like my first 3 or 4 years when I started speaking.
Yeah.
I did Toastmasters. I loved it.
Yeah. I really enjoy it myself. So when it comes to setting goals, sometimes people set goals that they want, but a lot of times people set goals for what they think they want. Is there anything that you can say to help us divide what we want versus what we think we want?
So I love that you asked that question, because I used to, when I first started doing that, I would say, okay, well, what's the goal that you want to set? And they would say, I want to increase my business by 20%. Okay, I want to increase the income by 20% revenue. So then we kind of figure out a plan. What do how many more sales do you have to get? How many more? Work it backwards. The numbers. We would turn it into a numbers game.
Right.
But a lot of times I would find out that people aren't actually. Then they don't follow through, because we didn't actually figure out what is the why. Okay, what is the why? And so the way I find out what somebody's why is by asking a ton of why questions, and just keep going backwards. Okay, so why would that be important? Okay, so why would that be important? What will that do for you when that happens? And you just keep needling it down until you get to that final why. I did recently. Somebody that I was doing that with, it came down to when we got it all the way, whittled it all the way down to she wants her children to be proud of her.
Wow. Yeah.
It was like it came down to that deep is what it mattered. What her big goal up here was that, that was really what the whole thing was about.
Wow.
Isn't that wild?
That is.
Yeah.
Is it the 7 layers of why?
I've heard
general...
I have heard that, and I forget somebody does that. I can't remember who taught that. You're absolutely right about that. But yeah, this was just something. Yeah, I probably picked it up from there.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
I have been through the 7 layers. We were getting a mortgage for a house at one point, and the mortgage lender wanted to ask us the 7 layers of why, and I was like, wow, that's an interesting perspective to take for what we're doing.
Yeah.
It's not like, big, hairy, audacious goals that we're trying to set. It's a house.
I just want a house. I want a place to live.
and she walked us through that, and I thought that was interesting.
That's very cool. She sounds like a good mortgage broker.
Yeah, she was great.
Yeah.
So there are several mental blocks that people who are in business come up against, but I think the one that is the most common is imposter syndrome.
Mm-hmm.
What do you have to say on imposter syndrome, and how can you get over it?
Well, I'll tell you, I've experienced imposter syndrome myself. When I first started 12 years ago, I was sharing with a gentleman I knew through the networking world that I was going to start speaking on the networking and referral partnerships. And he said to me, like, I already was feeling, I was licking my wounds that I was shutting my business down. And then he said to me, why is anybody going to ever listen to you when you crashed and burned your business? And that was, that tape played over and over in my head for a long time. That was really rough. And but that's okay. I pray for him, and I hope well for him in his life.
Right.
The imposter syndrome, so I've experienced that where I've been the one sitting there going, why are they going to listen to me? Why would somebody listen to me? And Darren Hardy, who is one of my, he's one of my go-tos that I listen to. He does a Darren Daily. I listen to him every morning during the work week, 5 days a week. And but he said in one of his books, I can't remember, he has 2 books, one of his 2 books, and then I've seen him say it as well, though, that the most successful people in the world, because he used to own Success magazine, and so he has interviewed some of the most successful people in the world, from Warren Buffett to Tony Robbins to some of the biggest multi-billionaires in the world. And he said the one thing that they all had in common was they all were wondering if anybody, they were always waiting for somebody to find out that they didn't belong.
Wow.
That they would be exposed as a fake, a phony. And that just was so helpful for me. That it's not just little old me experiences that, but that's across the board.
Wow.
I
would never expect
right,
them.
like Bill Gates experiences those same insecurities that I do. Now, he may not experience, financial insecurities that I have experienced, in the past, but he still, and he may have at one point, I don't think he ever experienced financial insecurity in his life, thankfully for him.
Right.
But he experiences those inner insecurities that I experience, that I'm guessing you experience, and a lot of other folks experience.
Yeah. Wow. It is helpful to know that the top ones,
Yes.
everybody who's been successful has also been through it.
I've read both of his books, Darren Hardy's books, multiple times, so I can't tell you which one it was.
Right.
But so I just suggest read both of his books.
There you go. There you go. That's the way to do it. So moving to the other main concept that you like to teach on, which is emotional intelligence. That is incredibly important for entrepreneurs, but I don't know that everybody understands what it is and why it's important.
Right.
So could you expound on that for us?
Sure. So I first want to say that it was through getting training through Tony Robbins' company called Robbins Madonna's Training, which I've been doing for many years, getting additional training to just be a better coach and a better human in general. I was introduced to Daniel Goleman, who wrote the original book, Emotional Intelligence, I think in 1990, thereabouts. And when I read that book, I was just like, I cannot believe that this is the first time that I'm being exposed to this in this fashion, okay? So for anybody who doesn't know what emotional intelligence, what the 4 pillars of emotional intelligence are, they are, it's self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, and relationship management. And so the main pillar, though, is self-awareness, because nothing else, if you don't have self-awareness, the rest of it, you're never going to be able to experience or fulfill the other 3. I believe I've come to learn that it is so important to have a high level of emotional intelligence. And one of the things that I've come to learn through all of my reading and taking programs and everything is that your EQ, your emotional intelligence, way it's called EQ, it can go up and it can go down. Unlike IQ, your IQ is set, it's fixed. Your EQ, you can work on it to develop it more, to be stronger, or if you ignore it, you'll find, so you see somebody, you can tell when somebody's got very low EQ. And that can be the person that is the CEO of a company, or it can be, the person bagging groceries at your supermarket. If you look at their life and either the other people in their life or the lack of people, the relationships, you will see that there it goes down. But the more that you're intentionally working on yourself, so you have to be intentional about it.
Right.
So the first thing is you have to be self-aware, aware of why I'm feeling the way I feel. Why, if I got angry at somebody when I was at the store, what emotion was going on, okay? Because clearly now my self-management was not, my level of self-management was lower if I'm behaving in a way. So what triggered that? And I have to look back as to why. Recently I was feeling, I didn't realize I was feeling sad. And it was because somebody that was not directly personally affecting me, that I didn't personally know this person, was sick and was dying. But it was a relative of my wife's who was very important to her. And so but I was trying to figure out, like, why am I feeling sad? What is going on here? And it was her sadness. I was feeling sad because she was sad.
Wow.
So it was kind of, and so I had to realize that. So that's self-awareness. The self-management part is how I behave with, just for myself, okay? I'm feeling sad, so do I eat a full bag of Oreo cookies, which I can do and enjoy doing in the moment,
Right.
okay? Or self-management is, I'm feeling sad. I want to feel these feelings, but at the same time, I don't want that to turn into a depression. So let me get to the gym. Okay, so I'm not ignoring the feelings. I'm not pretending they don't exist. But at the same time, I'm going to self-manage. I'm going to do something about it so that it doesn't become something I don't want it to become. Or I'm going to watch a comedy or watch, a comedian, whatever, so that I just might, so instead of me lashing out at somebody when I'm driving down the highway, I just let it roll off the bat, like, all right, whatever.
Right.
So then we get into the social awareness, okay? And that's a big part of where empathy comes from, okay? And so that's where I start caring about you, okay? I'm aware of what's going on with you. Why, hey, Rebecca doesn't seem herself today. What's going on there? Or how am I behaving towards Rebecca? I care about how I am behaving towards you, okay? But then I care, I am having empathy, but then that's where the relationship management comes in. What am I doing about it? Okay, so we see a lot of times in politics on both sides where their relationship management skills are in the toilet because they couldn't care less how they make other people feel when they're screaming at the top of their lungs at each other and offending everybody else, and just hurling insults at each other.
Right.
That is poor relationship management. Now, one of the things that I really was so surprised to learn, it's in Travis Bradberry's book, Emotional Intelligence 2.0, which, and he has a chart that he shows, which really, I thought about it from my own perspective and in my own life. When I started working in a factory as a teenager, my interaction with other people was not very high. Okay, so we're just talking from a business perspective right here. My interaction with other people was not very high. I worked on the line, where I was working, talked to a few people, made a couple of friends. But overall, I wouldn't say that I had strong emotional intelligence. Then, as I got older, I got more mature, I moved up, then you become kind of a supervisor, or actually I became a line attendant. Now I'm talking to more people, okay? So now I have to start focusing more on my relationship skills, getting to know people more. Then you move into, let's say, a supervisor position. Now I'm talking not just to the folks in that little area, on the full line, but now I'm talking to multiple lines. I'm working, I'm overseeing a lot of people. Each step of the way, your emotional intelligence is going up. Okay. Now there comes a point where you're at a manager's level. Now I'm managing an entire company. Okay, we're managing all of the people on the floor, and so it's very important that I'm operating at a higher emotional intelligence level.
Right.
What happens is when folks don't do that, those are the managers that we eventually see get fired. Okay, because they start to see the numbers going down. People are not showing up. But then what they've learned, what Travis Bradberry talked about is, but then they go to, let's say, a director. And they see now they're not dealing with as many people, and they notice that their EQ score starts going down. Then they go to somebody, let's say, in the C-suite, a CEO, and they start to become more isolated, and they even isolate themselves more. So the higher up the ladder they're going, the more isolated they are, and they see that if they're not intentionally working on themselves, their EQ scores start to go down. And so that goes back to what you asked earlier about the growth mindset. It is the people who are at that higher level that have a growth mindset, that are working on themselves personally and professionally, or are willing to be called out. Okay, that's another one that, they don't have such a thin skin, that they have a thick enough skin that when they get called out, they could take it and work on that. Those are the ones that are the exceptional CEOs, the exceptional leaders in companies, in government, anywhere. Those are the ones. And I thought that was so fascinating when I learned that, and I started reading more about it because I just thought that was so great.
So going back to the self-awareness being the most important pillar.
Right.
What are the most recommended things to do to help you turn an inside eye and see yourself and be more self-aware?
It's, we have emotions all day, every day. Not just thoughts. I think I was just listening to something earlier today that we have 50,000 thoughts a day, something like that.
That's a lot.
Now, every thought is attached to an emotion to some degree. Now, we can have a long period of thoughts that are connected to the same emotion, or we can have, just one thought that creates an emotion. The thing that I learned to do and encourage people to do, there's a couple of things. First is to self-reflect regularly. If I feel happy, I try to ask myself, okay, what happened that I feel happy? Especially if I'm, if it wasn't like all of a sudden something great happened, but I'm starting to just feel generally happy. Okay, what's going on here? That I'm generally feeling happy right now. If I'm feeling really, really badly, if I start to feel some level of darkness or depression, all right, what clicked? What triggered this? Let's say in the last 24 to 48 hours, because sometimes we don't experience. I've learned for me that I don't experience an emotion sometimes. It doesn't really start to show its head. If it's really dark emotion, it could sometimes be the result of something that happened yesterday, and I don't start really feeling it. And I've learned that if I'm feeling something and nothing happened in the moment, I need to look back like 24 to 48 hours, because it's our subconscious is an amazing thing. It's an amazing thing, but it's also tricky.
Yes.
Very tricky.
Quite.
and it's always working. Always working, even when we're asleep. That's when it does its most work, I believe, is what I've learned. So, does that answer your question?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah.
So I think the third main pillar of your business is teaching, networking, and building relationships. How do growth mindset and EQ both play into that?
Yeah, so the first, in regard to the EQ, that would be very much about the social awareness and the relationship management. Okay, and that plays into the networking as well. If you walk into a networking event and you are just you have no self-awareness, okay, and you're somebody that you're just going to go over and talk to somebody and tell them all about your business for 30 minutes, vomit on them, and then, you shove business cards in everybody's hands,
Right.
and then walk away move on to the next crowd. That's really poor social awareness and relationship management skills. The relationship management, it really comes into what you did. You and I met through a virtual networking event. And what the best thing you can do with as in regard to relationship management is follow up. Following up with the people that you're meeting, following up with the people you've engaged with. Now, I know in virtual networking, which has gotten less and less since the pandemic. The pandemic saved a lot of businesses through virtual networking,
Yeah.
but then people wanted to get more into the face-to-face networking again, and but the relationship, that relationship of meeting somebody, now we need to take that to the next level. Okay, so we met in this large group of people. Okay, we've experienced that in the 2 to 5 minutes that you and I talked, I liked you enough that now let's either have a phone call, our own Zoom call, or a coffee. We can meet in person for a coffee.
Right.
That's the relationship management. Then the follow-up to that relationship management is if somebody hires you, that you met this person in a networking event, you've invested the time now, you did your follow-up, you had your coffee, they want to hire you. Now then the most important part of that is the follow-through. Doing what you said you were going to do and performing the services you said you were going to perform. Now, for me, what I see is the other person, if they have a high level of social awareness and relationship management, that's where the referral should come in play. Okay, I love the work you did. You did a great job. You helped me. Now let me reward you with a referral. Okay, let me keep my eyes and ears open, or even share with people who I think could benefit from knowing you based on your services and products. That also comes into where it's our responsibility as the business owner, the entrepreneur, the sales professional. It's still our responsibility to not expect them to give me that referral.
Right.
Well, it's nice to have, I would
Right.
love for them to give me that referral, but I'm going to ask for it too. I'm going to ask for it. So you ask for it in a way that's not threatening and that is not putting them on the spot so that they feel obligated. Because I don't want, if you don't want to give me a referral, then don't give me a referral. That's the way I see it. So the way I ask it is I will say to somebody, if you know somebody like yourself that could benefit from the services that I've provided to you, I would love an introduction. Now, we all know people like ourselves, right? And so all I have to do now is, and the most important part, as I said, if you know somebody like yourself, okay, or you can be a little more direct and say, who do you know like yourself that could benefit from the services that I've provided for you? Because I'd love an introduction to them. Okay, but at the same time, you're not being too You're not making that person feel, like, oh, I've got to make sure I get,
Right.
The worst one to me is when somebody, that whole thing where somebody puts a piece of paper and a pen in front of you and says for you to write down,
Write down
three
all the
names.
people you know. Yeah.
Yeah, I would slide that pen and paper back into them and say, I'll get back to you on that.
Right. That is quite a jarring
Oh.
request, I have found.
That would be the end of our working relationship right there.
Right. So what do you see next for Growth Academy? Since you clearly are growing all the time.
Yeah.
What's your next?
So I do,
concept?
during the pandemic, we developed a 2-day workshop called Total Business Breakthrough. And it's a very deep dive into your business. We have a handful, about 3 to 5 speakers at it. I do the majority of the teaching. It's probably about 15 to 16 hours worth of training that we do in those 2 days. And it's a lot of fun. People really love it. What we're going to do is we're currently working on it, we're developing it, it's going to be a very similar program to Total Business Breakthrough, but it'll remove the sales and marketing and prospecting part, and it'll be a much deeper dive into leadership. And that's going to be focusing more on folks in the C-suite, and higher level managers, and that's what we're working on right now. So we're working on putting that package together. So a lot of it will be the same. A lot of the content will be the same, but a lot of it will be different. To back that up, to piggyback on that, I'm writing a book right now, a new book that will be focusing on both emotional intelligence and leading across the different generations. And so I'm really excited about that. So that's, I don't know when that book will be released. It will be released before January, or it'll at least be done before January. So released versus done are two different things.
Different things, yes,
Yeah.
they are.
Yeah.
So how many books total have you already published, and plus this one that's coming out?
Well, I've self-published 4 books. One of those 4 books is what they call an under 90-minute read. So it was, I had written it. It was just supposed to be, initially, it was going to be a something I was going to do as an ebook. And when somebody read it, they were like, Joe, you need to be able to sell this book. They loved it so much. And it's a very short story. It's probably it'd take you about 90 minutes, an hour to 90 minutes to read it. And it's a story. It's done in a story format, teaching the referral marketing success course.
Oh, okay.
But it's, and I'll just give you the quick synopsis on it. It's about a woman who leaves a corporate job to become a coach. And when she starts networking, she's just terrible at it. So I used a friend of mine as the model for the person that becomes her mentor. He sees her networking horribly. He reaches out to her and is very blunt with her about that, and walks her through the 4 steps of the referral marketing success course. But only, like he's just teaching her, like, this is what you need to do with this. This is what you need to do for that. And till at the end, she's networking and giving referrals at a very high level. So that was my 4th book. I wrote that last year, and I love that book. And it's like this, nice little story. It's called The Networking Chronicles. And
is that the first one that you've written that has been a more of a fictional
It was,
story?
yes.
Okay.
It was the first one ever. So it allowed me to get a little bit of my fiction writing out.
Right.
Exactly.
Gotcha.
To get some of my fiction, get that out of me. And
Awesome.
yeah.
So there's 2 questions that I always ask my guests. The first is, other than your own books and some of the books that you've mentioned throughout our discussion, if an entrepreneur or a small business owner came to you and said, what book should I read now? What would be your suggestion?
It's this one particular book is a must-read for my clients. I'm going to go back to Darren Hardy. Is his book is The Entrepreneur Roller Coaster.
Okay.
It is just a fantastic book. His other book, The Compound Effect, is a great book. The Entrepreneur Roller Coaster it's really an amazing blueprint for any small business owner as an entrepreneur. I do want to piggyback on that though and say that the follow-up book for that should be a book by Jeffrey Gitomer called The Little Black Book of Connections, which will teach you to network at a very good level if you're not a strong networker. I highly encourage people to read my book, Intentional Networking, to learn how to network as well. I really love that book, and I go back to it myself from time to time. But his book, The Little Black Book of Connections, fantastic.
Okay.
But I would start with The Entrepreneur Roller Coaster.
Gotcha.
And then piggyback it with that.
Thank you. And the second question that I always ask my guests is, what has been the best piece of advice in your life that you have been given?
Well, there are two things, okay? The first was from my father about my neighbor who used to live in his van. He was, trying to spite his family, and so he moved into his van out in front of his house. And when my dad realized that I was smoking pot when I was about 17, 18 years old, he caught me out in the garage one day and just said to me, "Joe, you don't want to end up like he's living." So that always stuck in the back of my mind. Now, I don't mean that I kind of used like his life as my gauge. Okay, as long as I don't get to here.
Right.
But it was, he was very heartfelt when he said that to me. But in the, I would say in this journey, the past 12 years, there was a man that came into my life about 16 or 17 years ago. His name is Earl Haddon, and Earl has passed away last year. And he became a mentor. He was a coach for a little while of mine, and he was more than anything, he was a great friend. But and he went through my business closing with me. He went through my divorce with me. He went through me starting this business. He went through me making a lot of mistakes in this business. And the one thing he repeatedly said to me that eventually he didn't have to say it anymore. To me it was the best piece of advice was, well, that didn't work. What's a better way of doing it? He would say that over and over and over to me, to the point it was just like, so I would call him up, whining about, oh, this didn't work, or they said that, or this, and then he would say, okay, well, that didn't work. What's a better way of doing it? And to me, it was so, the advice was to get out of that fixed mindset and focus more on the growth mindset. What is a better way of doing it?
Right.
And gosh, that just changed it. So I learned that I had, well, he's not here anymore. If you ever on a Zoom call with me, though, you will see his picture right behind me on my bookshelf. But so he's always in, he's always there in my head. But that being said, it eventually just became a part of who I am. That didn't work. What's a better way of doing it?
That's great advice.
Yeah.
Tell us more about Growth Academy and where we can learn more about your programming.
Yeah, so our website is growthacademycoaching.com, pretty simple. And you could go on there, you can learn all about the program, Growth Academy. The other thing that we like to do is we like to offer people an opportunity to just, get a little taste. And we offer a 30-minute, no obligation, free coaching session to pretty much anybody. We've had some people who've tried to do it 2-3 times. It just comes a point where it's like, okay, listen, we can't keep giving the free candy away. But we do, we offer that, and so there's a link for you to go ahead and click on that. One of the things I'll just share real quickly, we in our coaching, what we do is we generally, when you're working with me or one of our other coaches, is you meet with us on twice a month, whether it's through virtual, online, or in person. But then we also have a monthly mastermind that we do the first Wednesday of every month, and that's virtual. Then another thing we do is 2 times a year we have an in-person full day mastermind retreat with all of the coaching clients come together, and we just have so much fun when we do that. That's a really great time. We do it in Chapel Hill because it's kind of a middle ground for a lot of people.
Well, thank you very much, Joe. I really appreciate
Thanks for
your
having
time
me.
and coming today.
Yeah, I loved it. Thank you.
You.